Go clean toilets now. The words didn't fall. They detonated. In the crystal-lit hush of a five-star dining hall, that command ripped through linen and silverware like a blade, leaving silence behind it. Heads turned, forks froze, conversations died mid-breath. At the center of it all stood him, a black man in a crisp white chef's coat, sleeves rolled neatly, posture calm. His chest didn't rise in anger, his eyes didn't flinch. He just stood straight, unyielding as the insult tried to brand him. The one who hurled it, a silver-haired billionaire in a navy suit, leaned forward with venom still dripping from his lips. His finger jabbed the air, aimed like a spear at the man in white. To his right, an FBI agent shifted uneasily, caught in the performance of authority but not yet sure which way power leaned. Around them, guests watched with a mixture of discomfort and hunger for spectacle. A woman in black angled her phone higher, red light blinking. A man at another table whispered, "What's happening?" The hush in the room wasn't ordinary anymore, it was charged, like the pause before thunder. But the man in the chef's coat, he didn't answer. He had heard variations of that phrase before. At 16, outside a Carolina diner, told to clear plates faster, boy. At 24, in the lobby of a Vegas hotel, told to stand aside, while others checked in. And now, decades later, in a room he had paid to fill, he was told to clean toilets. Same tone, same arrogance, different stage. He breathed once, slow. He didn't reach for words. Not yet. His silence, more cutting than any comeback, made the insult echo louder in the air. The billionaire mistook that silence for submission. He smirked, raised his chin, and doubled down. "People like you serve. That's all you're good for. Don't think wearing white makes you one of us," guests murmured. Some uncomfortable, some entertained. The FBI agent's hand brushed against his belt, uncertain if this was his cue. The man in white still hadn't moved. He stood as if anchored to the marble floor itself. That stillness unnerved the room. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now, back to him. His eyes lifted, slow and steady, until they met the billionaire's glare head-on. No words yet, just presence. A presence that unsettled more than anger ever could. At a table near the wall, a young man muttered, "This doesn't feel right." His companion pressed record anyway, whispering, "The world needs to see this." The red light blinked again. Recording the moment injustice mistook itself for victory. The billionaire slammed his palm flat on the table. Glass rattled, cutlery chimed. "You're nothing," he spat, "and I'll prove it in front of everyone tonight." The man in white blinked once, as though cataloging the moment, engraving it into memory. Still calm, still silent. But the room could feel it. Justice was waiting, and it would not wait long. The man in the white coat didn't just walk into that dining hall by chance. His name, still hidden from those who mocked him, was Daniel Cross, 42 years old, founder of Cross Global Holdings, net worth in the billions. And tonight, he chose to dress not as a magnate, not as the headline of Forbes, but as a chef. Why? Because this wasn't a dinner, it was a test. The billionaire shouting at him, Richard Halden was on the verge of closing a $4.9 billion merger with Daniel's company. On paper, Halden's tech empire looked powerful. But Daniel had heard whispers that Halden treated employees like pawns, that bias wasn't a bug but a feature in his leadership. And Daniel wanted proof before signing anything. So he walked into the very restaurant Halden rented for the closing dinner, stripped of boardroom armor. No entourage, no designer suit, no watch flashing six figures. Just a plain chef's coat, clean hands, calm eyes. If Halden saw a servant instead of a partner, that would tell Daniel everything he needed to know. And sure enough, in less than 10 minutes, the proof came screaming across white tablecloths. "Go clean toilets now." Daniel hadn't planned the insult, but he had expected it. He'd lived it before. At 25, when he walked into a bank with his first seven-figure check, the teller asked if the account was really his. At 32, when he arrived at a hotel in Milan, the concierge asked if he was lost. Different cities. Same tone. Same disbelief that power could look like him. Now, at 42, in a room he'd funded, it was happening again. He let the silence work. Because silence was a mirror, and Halden's words were bouncing back louder than Daniel ever needed to raise his voice. From the corner, guests still watched uneasily. A woman in a sequined dress leaned to her husband. Why is he yelling at the chef? Another man whispered, "That's not a chef's stance. Look at him. He's not afraid." A phone camera clicked again. Halden, mistaking murmurs for support, only grew bolder. His voice cracked with arrogance. "You think you can stand in my dining room? This deal is mine. People like you cook, clean, and step aside." Daniel exhaled once, steady, deliberate. He hadn't come here for theater. He came for truth. And Halden was giving it to him, word by word, insult by insult. What Halden didn't know was that the same calm man standing before him had the authority to make or break every contract on the table tonight. And in a matter of minutes, the decision would no longer be his. The air was heavy, humming, waiting. Daniel didn't need to rush, because the storm was only beginning. Richard Halden's voice rose higher, desperate to turn silence into surrender. "Security!" he barked across the dining room. "Remove him. Now." The FBI liaison on site for the event shifted forward, tall frame tents beneath a navy jacket. His badge glinted under the chandelier as he placed a hand near Daniel's shoulder, not grabbing yet, but close enough for the threat to hang heavy. "Sir, step aside," he ordered, voice low but edged. Conversations froze again. Guests at nearby tables leaned back, glasses half raised, unsure if they were about to witness an arrest or a meltdown. The woman with her phone angled higher, red light steady. Another diner whispered, "Why's the FBI moving on a chef?" The irony didn't land on Halden, who only smirked wider. "You see?" Halden sneered. "Even federal eyes know you don't belong here. Stupid." The word cracked like a whip, each syllable deliberate. Daniel didn't move. His chest stayed still, his gaze steady. He had seen this choreography before: authority circling, crowd whispering, truth hanging in the air like static before lightning. He let it play. Because the longer Halden talked, the deeper he dug his own grave. The FBI agent's hand hovered closer now. "Sir, you're disrupting an event. Cooperate, or we'll escort you out." Daniel's lips parted for the first time that night. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried like steel. "Check who I am first." The words didn't land on Halden. They enraged him. He slammed his palm flat on the table, glasses rattling, wine spilling across linen. "You're nothing but a fraud in a borrowed coat," he roared. "This deal is mine, and you'll never touch it." Gasps rippled. One guest at the far table muttered, "Fraud? How does he know that?" Another shook his head. "He doesn't. He's bluffing." Phones tilted higher, catching every second. The FBI agent finally placed a firm hand on Daniel's arm. The gesture was practiced, procedural, but it was also reckless. Because Daniel didn't flinch, didn't resist, didn't even glance at the grip. He just stood, anchored, as if the marble beneath his shoes was his stage. From the back, a young server whispered, "Why is this happening?" He didn't even raise his voice. The older maitre d' replied under his breath, "Because sometimes silence scares men like Halden more than fury ever could." And in that silence, the dining room changed. Guests weren't just watching anymore, they were witnessing. Halden mistook the moment for victory, his grin widening as he barked again. Get him out of here before he embarrasses himself further. But the truth was clear to everyone but him. Daniel wasn't the one being diminished. The billionaire was. And the louder Halden shouted, the smaller his power began to look. The storm had broken open, and Daniel hadn't lifted a finger. The agent's grip tightened on Daniel's arm. Chairs scraped as the weight of the room shifted, unsure if this quiet man was about to be dragged across the marble floor like a criminal. But Daniel didn't tense. He didn't fight. Instead, his voice cut through the hush, low, calm, deliberate. "Run my name." The words weren't shouted. They were delivered like an instruction, like a fact too heavy to ignore. The FBI agent hesitated, caught between the billionaire's command and the calm authority in Daniel's tone. His fingers twitched against the shoulder of a man who hadn't even raised his voice once tonight. Halden laughed, sharp and cruel. "Don't listen to him. He's a nobody in a coat. Check the kitchen. He probably sneaked in for scraps." His chuckle slithered across the tables, but the sound landed flat, forced. From the corner, a young woman at table 6 raised her phone higher. Her friend whispered, "Is he really just a chef?" She shook her head. "Chefs don't stand like that." Daniel slowly reached into his pocket, not rushing, not defensive, and pulled out a slim black phone. With one press, a name lit up across the screen. Nia Thompson, executive assistant. He tapped once and lifted it to his ear. "Nia," he said, steady. "Activate protocol." On the other end, her voice came crisp. efficient. Confirmed, sir. Protocol engaged. Logging every word from this moment. Live sync with legal team in progress. The words weren't loud, but they carried, seeping into the air like an electric current. Guests tilted forward. Phones caught the glow of the screen. Halden's smirk faltered, if only for a second. "Don't play games with me," Halden snapped, pointing again as though fingers could erase facts. "You're nothing, and that phone call won't save you." Daniel turned his head slowly, eyes unblinking. His silence pressed heavier than any insult. The agent finally released his shoulder, unsure. His gaze darted between Halden, red with arrogance, and Daniel, calm as stone. "What protocol?" he asked, voice low. Nia's voice still carried through the speaker. All language flagged, all bias logged. Corporate compliance notified. A pause. "And sir, the board is watching." Murmurs broke out across the dining room. Someone gasped. A man near the back muttered, "Board? What board?" Halden tried to laugh again, but it came out brittle. "A bluff," he spat. "That's all this is. Some pathetic stunt." But the room wasn't laughing with him anymore. Daniel didn't need to raise his voice. He didn't need to argue. The moment had shifted. The crowd wasn't seeing a servant anymore. They were seeing something Halden refused to. Power waiting in silence. And power had just spoken. The dining room wasn't quiet anymore. It hummed low voices, muffled gasps, the subtle click of cameras sliding higher above linen-draped tables. Halden mistook it for approval. He raised his chin, puffing out his chest as if his arrogance could fill the space Daniel's silence had already claimed. "You think your little phone trick means anything?" he barked. "I've built empires. I decide who belongs at this table. Not you. Not ever." Daniel didn't flinch. He had heard variations of that sentence his entire life. But the room heard something different. Desperation in a voice used to being obeyed. At the far end, a young server hesitated, tray trembling in her hands. She set it down and spoke, her voice barely above a whisper but sharp enough to cut. "I saw his name in the system earlier," she said. "Cross. Reservation flagged executive level." Heads turned. Halden's eyes narrowed, laser-focused on her. "Stay in your lane," he hissed. "Staff don't speak in my presence." But it was too late. The words had cracked something open. A woman in a red dress stood halfway from her chair, phone raised. "He hasn't done a thing wrong," she said, louder now. "You're humiliating him because of how he looks." Another diner muttered, "Exactly. He hasn't even raised his voice." Halden spun, pointing at each witness in turn. "Sit down. All of you. Don't be fooled. This is a fraud, a con artist in disguise, a stupid stunt in my restaurant." The word stupid landed harder this time, not just as an insult, but as a desperate plea for control. Daniel finally moved just a blink, a small turn of his head toward the woman in red. His voice was calm, steady. "Speak up," he said. She nodded, standing taller. "This isn't right," she said, clear now, strong. "You don't get to erase someone because you don't like what you see." Phones rose higher. The hum became a buzz. Halden slammed his fist on the table again, rattling silverware like a gavel. "Security!" he barked to the FBI agent still hovering. "Remove them all if you have to." The agent hesitated, his stance shifting. His orders were unclear now, tangled between the arrogance of a client and the weight of something larger pulsing through the room. Daniel's phone still glowed, Nia's voice steady through the line. "Everything's logged, sir. Every insult, every order. They'll hear it all." Daniel breathed once, slow and deliberate. Then he said, not to Halden, but to the entire dining room, "You called me stupid in a room I paid for, and every word since has been louder than mine. That's not power. That's fear." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was charged. Witnesses weren't whispering anymore. They were choosing sides, and Halden's grip on the room was slipping, second by second. Halden's face flushed red, the confidence of a man used to obedience cracking into rage. His voice cut through the dining hall, louder than the clinking glass he had just rattled. "He's a fraud!" Halden barked, jabbing a finger toward Daniel as though accusation could conjure truth. "Throw him out before he poisons this room any longer." The FBI agent shifted again, hand hovering near his radio. The hesitation was visible now. The agent's gaze flicked from Daniel's calm stillness to the growing sea of raised phones. A room full of witnesses. A room unwilling to look away. Daniel didn't move. He let the words hang, let the weight of Halden's fury reveal itself. His silence wasn't empty, it was a mirror, and every insult only bounced back louder. From the left, A man in a navy suit finally spoke, his tone low but clear. "You've said enough, Richard." Halden snapped toward him. "Stay out of this." But the murmurs kept rising. Another voice, "Why hasn't anyone checked his name? Why are we just listening to you scream?" The billionaire slammed the table again, veins visible in his neck. "Because I own this room. I own this deal." And then came the slip, the sentence that cracked his facade wider than he realized. "People like him," Halden spat, his words sharp, dripping with disdain, "don't belong at a table worth billions. They scrub floors, they clear dishes, they stay quiet. That's their place." The gasp that followed wasn't quiet. It rippled through the dining room like a wave. Glasses paused mid-air. A fork clattered onto porcelain. Someone whispered, "Did he really just say that?" Phones tilted higher. One guest near the bar muttered, "This isn't business. This is bias." Another, braver, added, "This is what power looks like when it's scared." Daniel finally raised his eyes fully, locking onto Halden's glare. His voice, when it came, was calm enough to still the air. "You've mistaken arrogance for authority, and you've mistaken me for a man you could erase." Halden sneered, desperate, cornered. "Erase? I'll erase you from this building tonight. Security now." But the FBI agent didn't move. Not yet. His radio hand twitched, but his eyes lingered on Daniel, then on the sea of witnesses holding up cameras like shields. Nia's voice came steady through Daniel's phone, audible enough for those nearest to hear. "Escalation logged. Language captured. Bias confirmed." The words weren't theatrical. They were procedural, and that made them more dangerous than any outburst. For the first time, Halden looked rattled. His voice cracked. "He's bluffing. That's all this is. Bluffing." But no one in the room seemed convinced anymore. The tide had shifted, and Halden's empire was shrinking with every word he shouted. The tension snapped when the FBI agent finally stepped closer. His hand, steady but uncertain, reached for Daniel's arm. The room held its breath, phones raised higher, red dots blinking like a constellation of witnesses. "Sir, you need to come with me," the agent said, voice clipped, trained, rehearsed. Halden's grin spread wide, mistaking motion for victory. "Yes, finally. Drag him out of here. Let everyone see what happens when frauds try to play powerful." His laughter was sharp, brittle, meant to cover the crack already spreading in his authority. The agent's fingers brushed Daniel's sleeve, but before he could tighten his grip, Daniel spoke calm, steady, unshaken. "Touch me again," he said, voice low but sharp enough to slice through the room, "and you'll answer not to me but to the board that owns this deal." The agent froze. The words didn't sound like a bluff. They landed with the weight of fact. Murmurs rippled. Someone whispered, "The board?" Another said, "Wait, what board is he talking about?" Halden slammed his fist once more on the linen-draped table. "Don't listen to him! He's lying! He's nobody! A kitchen hand in a borrowed coat! Arrest him!" But the agent didn't move. His hesitation was visible now, his authority unraveling in front of 100 staring eyes. Daniel's phone still glowed in his palm. Nia's voice carried across the speaker, calm as ever. "Sir, escalation logged. Corporate compliance has eyes on this. Legal is monitoring live." The room shifted. Guests straightened, sensing something tectonic beneath the calm exterior of the man in white. Halden saw it too, and his face contorted. "You're not fooling anyone," he hissed. "If you had power, you'd show it. If you had wealth, you wouldn't be dressed like that." His voice cracked, raw with panic masquerading as dominance. Daniel lifted his head, eyes steady, words deliberate. "You think my worth is stitched into fabric. That's why you'll never see me coming." The line landed like a gavel. A few guests exhaled audibly. One woman muttered, "That's not a chef talking." Halden barked again, desperate, wild. "Get him out of here. I don't care how now." The agent shifted, but slower now, caught between duty and doubt. And in that pause, in that fragile moment of hesitation, the balance of the room changed. The power Halden thought he owned was slipping, leaking through every insult, every command that went unanswered. Daniel hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't moved an inch, but the storm was bending toward him. The dining hall was no longer just a room. It was a stage. Every phone lifted higher, every whisper grew louder, every second tightened like a drumbeat. Daniel didn't move. He didn't need to. His presence was pulling the truth into the open without force, without noise. On the phone, Nia's voice cut through the tension, crisp and undeniable. "Mr. Cross, the board has been notified. They're monitoring live. Protocol escalation is confirmed. Gasps broke out across the tables. One man leaned toward his wife, whispering, "Bored? Did she just say bored?" Another muttered, "This isn't a chef. No way." Halden's jaw tightened. His laugh came sharp, brittle. "Bored? What bored? Stop pretending. He's bluffing." His voice rose with each word, but it only made the silence around Daniel heavier, more damning. From near the wall, the young server who had spoken earlier found her courage again. "I told you," she said louder this time, voice trembling but steady enough to carry. "I saw his name in the system. Cross. Executive level." Phones swung toward her. The crowd shifted. Halden turned on her, fury flashing. "Quiet! You're nothing. You'll lose your job if you say another word." But she didn't shrink. She glanced at Daniel, then back at Halden. "I won't lie for you." The words landed like a slap. The room murmured, restless, tipping. Halden tried to recover, waving a dismissive hand. "This is absurd. He's nobody. He's nothing. You're all being played." Daniel finally raised his head fully, his eyes sweeping the room, steady as stone. When he spoke, it wasn't to Halden. It was to everyone watching. You don't erase a man by shouting over him. You only reveal yourself. The room exhaled. A guest near the bar whispered, "That line, did you hear that?" Another, filming from the corner, murmured, "That's going viral." Halden's voice cracked again. "You're insane. This deal is mine. Mine." His fists slammed the table, but his power was unraveling, thread by thread, word by word. Daniel glanced at his phone. "Nia," he said evenly, "send this feed to James, Sarah, and David." Her reply came sharp, efficient. "Already done, sir. They're reviewing now." 3 names, 3 board members, 3 voices that carried billions in weight. The crowd shifted again, realization dawning. This wasn't a bluff. This wasn't theater. This was real. And for the first time, Halden's face betrayed what his voice couldn't hide. Fear. Halden's face twitched, a vein pulsing at his temple. He scanned the room, desperate for an ally, but all he saw were cameras, dozens of tiny red lights blinking back at him like eyes he couldn't control. Daniel hadn't moved an inch. His calmness was no longer just unsettling, it was crushing. The stillness of a man who knew every card in his hand. From the phone, Nia's voice rang out again, sharper this time. "Confirmation received. Board members James, Sarah, and David are logged in. They're requesting your signal." The words spread through the dining hall like a fuse catching fire. Guests exchanged looks, whispers sharpened into conviction. One man muttered, "James, Sarah, David, those are cross-global board names." Another gasped, "Wait, Cross? As in Daniel Cross?" The young server who had dared to speak earlier whispered the name out loud, almost reverent, "Daniel Cross." And in that instant, the murmurs fused into clarity. Eyes widened, phones zoomed, pieces locked together. Halden's forced smile shattered. No, it's a trick. He's faking this. He's nobody." But his voice cracked under the weight of disbelief crumbling around him. Daniel finally spoke, his words measured, every syllable slicing the silence. "You've spent the night trying to erase me, but the truth doesn't disappear because you're loud. My name is Daniel Cross. I own the company you've been begging to merge with." Gasps detonated across the dining hall. One woman clapped a hand over her mouth. A man muttered, "Oh my God." Phones caught every second. Halden staggered back half a step, his voice faltering. You can't be. Look at you. You're dressed like—" Daniel cut him off, calm and final. "Like a chef? Like a servant? That was the point. I wanted to see you without the mask you wear in boardrooms. And now, everyone sees you too." The FBI agent, who had kept his hand near his radio all night, slowly lowered it, recognition dawning across his face. He stepped back, no longer a threat, but a witness. The young server's voice rose again, stronger this time. "He's telling the truth. I saw his name. He belongs here more than anyone." Applause broke out, not loud at first, but enough to echo. A ripple of solidarity across the tables as guests chose their side. Halden's empire, once untouchable, now stood naked under chandeliers and camera lights. And Daniel Cross stood calm, untouched, the truth finally out in the open. The storm had broken, and Halden was drowning in it. The applause spread like fire. First a few hands, then an entire table, then a wave of clapping that swallowed the dining hall. Halden stood frozen in the center, his smirk shattered, his face drained of the confidence he'd worn like armor. Everywhere he turned, eyes condemned him. Phones glared brighter than spotlights, recording his unraveling in real time. "You lied," a guest near the bar shouted, voice sharp with disgust. "You called him stupid, humiliated him, and he owns the very deal you were bragging about." Another voice cut in from the back. "This isn't business, it's bias. And we all saw it." Halden tried to roar back, but the words tangled in his throat. "No, you don't understand, I didn't know who he was." But that only made it worse. The woman in the red dress snapped. "So what if you didn't know? That's the problem. You judged him because of his skin, his clothes. That's all you saw." Guests nodded, murmurs swelling into outrage. Even those who had stayed quiet now raised their voices. "Exactly. This is disgusting. Unforgivable." The FBI agent took another step back, shoulders squared, his presence no longer protective of Halden, but neutral, an observer of his downfall. Daniel hadn't moved. He let the noise build, let the crowd become the mirror Halden could no longer avoid. His silence was a verdict, his stillness a sentence. Halden's desperation broke through in jagged bursts. "You can't do this to me. I built this empire. I've earned this deal." His fist slammed the table one more time, but the gesture was hollow, empty of power. Daniel finally spoke, voice calm but lethal. "You built nothing tonight but your own destruction. You mocked me in a room I funded. You spat on dignity in front of witnesses. And now, Richard, your empire collapses by your own hand." A hush followed sharp, absoluta. Then Nia's voice carried again from Daniel's phone, cutting through the stillness. "Sir, confirmation. Board review complete. Deal authorization revoked. Effective immediately." Gasps erupted. Guests turned their cameras to Halden, who stumbled back like the ground had given way beneath him. "No, no, this isn't real." But it was. Every phone screen lit with messages spreading faster than he could deny them. Tweets, clips, live streams, all carrying the same truth. Richard Halden had destroyed himself in front of a billion-dollar board and 100 witnesses. A man who once commanded rooms with arrogance now looked small, trembling under chandeliers he no longer owned. And Daniel Cross, still calm in his chef's coat, hadn't needed to shout once. Halden's face twisted, pale under the chandelier light. His voice cracked as he tried to claw back authority that had already slipped through his fingers. "You can't cancel me. You can't just erase a deal worth billions." But Daniel didn't answer with fury. He answered with fact. "It was never your deal to claim," he said evenly. "It was mine to grant, and now it's mine to end." Nia's voice came sharp through the phone speaker, carrying across the dining hall like a verdict. "Confirmation logged. Halden contract terminated. Access revoked. All negotiations void effective immediately." The words landed like a gavel striking oak. Guests gasped. Phones shook in their hands as they recorded the moment. One man muttered, "He just wiped out a $4.9 billion deal in less than a minute." Another whispered, "That's power." Halden staggered, his knees buckling as if the marble floor had turned against him. "No, you can't. This isn't legal. This isn't—" But before he could finish, the FBI agent finally spoke, his tone level, final. "Mr. Halden, step aside. You're no longer part of this event." It was the reversal Halden had never imagined. The badge that once moved at his command now stood as a barrier against him. Guests began clapping, not polite, but deliberate, pointed. The sound grew, a rhythm of approval that cut sharper than any insult. The woman in the red dress raised her phone higher, her voice ringing out, "Justice, right here, right now." Daniel remained steady, his coat unwrinkled, his gaze unbroken. "Richard Halden," he said, calm enough to still the applause for a beat. "You called me stupid in front of this room. You mocked me because you thought I was beneath you. Now you'll spend the rest of your career explaining how you lost everything in under an hour." Halden's lips moved, but no sound came. His empire had been gutted in real time. His power dissolved under the weight of his own arrogance. Nia's voice sealed it. Final entry logged. Halden removed from system. The screens of 100 phones lit brighter, capturing the precise second a billionaire was stripped of billions, not by force, but by truth. And the man who had stood silent through it all, Daniel Cross, had delivered justice without raising his voice once. The dining hall had transformed. What began as a spectacle of arrogance now stood as a courtroom, and the verdict was unanimous. Guests were no longer whispering. They were clapping, filming, standing, recording history in real time. Halden sagged against the table, a man emptied of authority, stripped of the deal he had built his pride on. His eyes darted wildly, searching for rescue, but none came, not from the FBI agent, not from the guests, not from the staff who had once rushed to his commands. Daniel Cross remained perfectly still, the white coat on his shoulders glowing beneath the chandelier. For a long moment, he let the noise fill the space, let the weight of the collapse settle in every corner of the room. Then, finally, he spoke. His voice was calm, steady, final. You called me stupid in a room I own. But tonight, the only foolishness anyone will remember is yours. Power doesn't shout. Power doesn't humiliate. Power simply decides. The room went silent for a breath, the line hanging heavy in the air, then erupted in applause that shook glass and rattled silverware. Guests stood from their chairs, clapping, cheering, capturing every second as though justice itself had just walked across the marble floor. The FBI agent gave a small nod, a silent acknowledgement that authority had shifted. The young server who had spoken out smiled through tears, her phone still in hand, whispering, "He did it without even raising his voice." Halden tried to speak again, but his words drowned under the applause, his presence erased by the very room he thought he controlled. Daniel turned, slow and deliberate, and walked toward the exit. He didn't rush. He didn't need to. Each step was steady, anchored, the stride of a man who had proven that dignity weighed more than billions. As the doors opened, the sound of clapping followed him into the night. Phones kept recording, voices kept rising, and history stamped its mark on the evening. A billionaire undone, not by rage, not by violence, but by the calm revelation of truth. Daniel's final words echoed even after he was gone, etched into every witness, every screen, every headline that would follow. I don't need to record injustice, I am the result of it. And with that, the story ended not in anger, but in power. The storm had passed. Justice had spoken.